I'd like to welcome you to the 5th Annual Blouin Creative Leadership Summit. Over the next 2 days, you'll see from the program, we'll be addressing many topics from global health to education to digital technology to the pressing global security challenges that face us. One part of addressing these challenges is collaboration and partnerships. The Foundation and the Summit benefits from the partnership of the United Nations, and in particular, the United Nations Office of Partnerships. With that, I would like to introduce Amir Dossal to give some remarks on that behalf. Thank you very much.
Distinguished guests, good morning. I especially would like to welcome the heads of states and government who've made a special effort to come here, and I would warmly welcome President Lobo Sosa, Prime Minister Prasad Bisesar. A warm welcome to President Lobo Sosa. From the Honduras, Prime Minister Prasad Bisesar from the Trinidad and Tobago. Beautiful part of the world, ma'am. Thank you. And the Prime Minister of St. Lucia, Prime Minister Stephenson King. Welcome, sir. We also have amongst our midst a number of ministers, and I'm delighted also the Secretary of State of Honduras is accompanying the President. Welcome, sir. I will take the liberty of welcoming you all, not just on behalf of the United Nations, but also for the Louise T. Blouin Foundation. Madame Louise Blouin is a good friend, not just a friend of the United Nations, but a friend to help make a difference. So the concept of the summit is very simple. We want to engage global leaders. We want to engage Nobel laureates. We want to engage the private sector, people from the art, culture field, to think outside the box, to try and figure out new ways of addressing the Millennium Development Goals. As a number of you know this, the United Nations is hosting a historic summit for the Millennium Development Goals, a 3-day summit which has never yet taken place. And the reason for the summit is to take stock of progress, but more importantly, to agree on specific actions. Actions which can never be taken alone, actions which require the engagement of all the actors. And as Matthew said earlier, it is about partnerships, and we are thrilled that this 2 days high-level conference will provide the platform for new thinking, and Mrs. Blouin plans to build this as a basis where these actions can be disseminated widely as well, so we can use that as a basis for lessons learned and best practice. I think it's worth mentioning that progress on the MDGs is patchy. While a number of countries are indeed making progress, China is doing wonderful work in addressing infant mortality and primary education. Progress in Africa is not what we'd like to achieve. And what we feel is important is it's not just about aid, it's about investment. So we need people to invest in the Millennium Development Goals. We need people to think that there is a business model where you create markets, you work with the poor, because poor, when they're fed well, and if they can get jobs, they will buy goods and services from you. And when they buy goods and services from you, they become members of society. And that, in turn, creates a better security atmosphere. So, on that note, I would like to warmly welcome the founder of the Blouin Creative Leadership Summit, Louise Blouin. Welcome.
Welcome to all of you. I guess we need friends, we need collaborators, we need partners. We need basically to get closer together to be able to achieve wonderful goals. And what the United Nations is doing in the next few days is really not an easy task. It's not an easy task because today we are faced with global issues. Global issues and globalization, this huge word, means a lot of things. It means that you're faced with multidisciplinary solutions with many other dimensions, such as geographic. And when you only say the word geographic, it is very complex because you're dealing with many different countries in different places in the world, and as you know, the world is big. And when you deal with each country, and within the countries, they all have their different cultures. And when we deal with cultures, we talk about values, belief, we talk about traditions and religion. What more complex can you get? So the summit is about a discussion about the challenges that we face. But since I'm a business person and that I like action, and I'm at heart an entrepreneur, I think that getting together and having conversation is good, but it's just not enough. To make it tangible in this partnership with the delegates, partnership with the United Nations and different corporations and heads of states, what I decided to do a few years ago is to build a site called artinfo.com. I invested about $100 million of my own money in that project because I felt that we needed a cultural CNN in the world. We needed to engage and get to know our neighbors because globalization, as I said, at the core of that word is culture, cultural respect. My first business was in a classified business. I was sort of the eBay of the world for cars, trucks. I traveled all over the world, and I think the best part of that business for me was to engage as a CEO and as a founder with the different cultures. And it's not easy. It's not easy because some of your products just don't work in other countries. So when I look at globalization and I look at the different very important elements that we have to deal with, such as health, poverty, environment, commodity crunches. All these elements are so complex, and I can just stand here and speak to you only about one subject for about 365 days. Health, for example. So how do we engage, and how can we help all of these different disciplines and all these different issues that we have in the world today and help each other? Using the platform that I use for artinfo.com is one way. The internet for me is a paradise. I've launched about 60 internet sites, and I remember when I first thought of the idea and how people would look at me very strangely and say, "What is this thing?" The first thing we need to do is to have enough confidence to go ahead and to dare. Each country now has to speak and have a voice. It's not about the superpowers anymore. It's about sharing challenges, opportunities, sharing trade. Culture is important, but economics is the core. How can you solve poverty if you have no money? How can you solve education issues if you have no money? Economics as trade brings money to pay for the bills. I was just having dinner this week with the head of IMF, Dominique Strauss-Kahn, who's doing a fabulous job at IMF and raising more money and helping. He is calling for the collaboration and help for CEOs and partners. But I say, anytime we offer money, we need to have infrastructure built. What China is doing and their investment in Africa, in some of the places, where they engage in building jobs, they build as well manufacturing plants, as well as schools. And that's the model. The model is not to send aid to, or money to aid or medication. It's for some parts of Africa to make their own medication. That's our goal. And that's how it's going to happen. Because if you can solve your own problem, that will be the best goal that we can achieve. The other thing that's very important to look at is the domino effect. If we don't take care of helping others, what will happen to the violence? How are we going to get engaged with the military? And if you look at, if you have poverty, that will bring violence. It will bring military action, local or possibly even international. The question that we have to ask ourselves today is, how much money do you want to spend on military? And the second question you want to ask yourself is, how much money do we still have left to spend on military? So if you're dealing with poverty issues and a lack of grains, or again, for example, we had in Mozambique, there was a big riot where 280 people were hurt and a few people died because of the spike of the grain price that went up 30%. We don't realize that sitting here in New York, but it's a reality. When there's an impact on the income in certain parts of Africa, you will have a direct impact on violence. The same thing happens, actually, there's a correlation of about 5% drop of income in Africa can bring you up to 30% increase in violence the next year. So those are serious numbers. So imagine the multiple effect. If you do this in many countries, and if you don't solve problems, it just becomes a huge issue. But there is good news. If you look at what has happened in the last 10 years in Africa, there's about a 5.3% growth in average in the last 10 years. Of course, it's not in all the regions, but it's positive. So there's some things that are happening that are great. So we have to sort of balance out a few facts and to say to ourselves, really, where are the priorities? But again, these priorities cannot be solved without dealing with the various disciplines. If you have a water problems, you need a scientist to help you. You need money for the technology. You need policy. So that's where it gets very complex, because a solution is just not found with money. It's found in the various disciplines. And that's why policies and governments need to work with the different disciplines to engage in a multidimensional aspect to find better solutions, because the solution is not ever seen in one discipline. Just a few facts for you. The cost of food today is 163% up from 2000. Fuel is up 217% since 2000. Just imagine what it does to an economy. When you have diversified revenues in an economy, you can sort of cover up when there's one sector that doesn't really function well. But when you're a small economy, it's much more difficult. It's like having a corporation with many products. If you have many products, there's one that doesn't do well, you can get over it easier because you're diversified. So when you're diversified with products and diversified geographically, it's even better. And that's what I recommend to countries, not to depend only on the consumption of their country, but outside. And we saw actually what happened with the financial crisis in the United States and around the world. It affected, of course, America, and it affected a lot of countries. It affected a lot Africa. So everything is sort of a vicious or good, positive circle. So we should take what is positive and work around it and try to find ways to benefit from this globalization. If I know that the markets are not doing as well as they should in certain countries, well, now I can go diversify and go into other regions. I can't rely as a business person only on the profits of one country today. We need to diversify. We need to be global in every single way. We need to think global. We need to be educated globally. We need to be, as well, looking at R&D, science, technology, internationally. We can't, even if you're actually sitting in America, you can't depend on one economy. And this has shown up in the last 2 years because America has gone through a very difficult time. So one of the things that's very important as well to look at that we're going to be speaking about is climate change. Climate change is, as we all hear about it, is a big challenge. If we continue at the rate of our current trends, 20 to 30% of our species will have a very high level of increase to vanish, to be extinguished. I mean, for us, in our daily life, it wouldn't affect us, but for many, it would affect them. There's other issues that we want to be asking ourselves, like if we look at Africa and how much investment has been done in primary schools and enrollment, on the positive side, it has gone in the last decade up from 79% to 97%. So that's quite remarkable. So we have clear understanding of positive impact of the good work that is done by foundations, by the United Nations, and we have negative. But there's certain things that are more fashionable than others. So what is in and what is out in the next decade? Greed is definitely out. People that don't understand that if they put greed on top of your agenda, as a trader from the banking world, or as a politician, or as an individual, you won't win. Because we are living today in an era of transparency. We are living today in an era where the media is no longer limited to a few platforms. The internet brings the truth. Sooner and later, someone is going to talk about good or bad. I was always told by my father, never do something that you'd regret to see in the first page of the newspapers. But today you can say, basically don't do something you'll regret to see around the world on the internet. The fact that we can reach out to communities like in America or in other countries and raise the money that is sufficient to pay for campaigns is pretty amazing. You can raise money through community. What does that actually mean for foundation and for different global organizations? It means that they have access to resources, and the big question is to make sure that the resources go at the right place and help where it's required to be going. So the internet is a big tool that we should not underestimate. It should be your friend. Use it. Use it as you can to benefit the education of the children, to deal with poverty, to fundraise, and to deal and engage that community in your policy making. I think that because of the complexity of the issues today, having a community is not a bad thing. It's like having a jury. They look at things in a different way, in a different light. And because you're dealing with different disciplines and different geographic dimensions, you need to have somehow not necessarily a jury, but a community. A community that looks at all the angles, and they can help. Who would have imagined that a Wikipedia could have been built? Not me. I never thought, and I was from the internet era, I never thought that we'd get 16 million people editing a product around the world in so many languages. 16 million people working for free because they care. That's the new era. That is the era and the aura that we want for our grandchildren. Our generation, now I won't tell you my age, or you probably know my age, but my generation and the generation just ahead of me has been the post-war generation. And I think we've been very spoiled. It's time to go back to the true values, and it's time for all your voices, from all the delegates, the heads of states, to unite, to make a front, and to show the path for our great-great-grandchildren, and to be proud of that path. Thank you very much. It is lovely to see you this morning, and I hope you enjoy the next 2 days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Louise and Amir, for your words of wisdom and encouragement. Before we take a quick break in advance of the next panel, which is a very engaging and important panel session, I would just like to say that our foundation is oriented and available to get your word out, whether you're a head of state, whether you're a delegate, whether you're a researcher, whether you're involved in business. What we'd like to do, and what we're doing with this summit, is we're promoting it on the internet. We're making the audio recordings available on iTunes for download, so your discussions and the solutions you arrive at through conversation with each other over these 2 days is in fact heard. Our best hope is that these solutions can be further taken up, acted upon, and implemented. Beyond the summit, we'd like to work with you throughout the year. So if you do have any suggestions, please feel free to speak with any of us throughout the course of the 2 days. So thank you. And we'll take approximately a 7-minute break before the next panel session.